Before I read from my own work, I will give homage to one of the poets who's in my poetry pantheon, one of my constant inspirations. Light the first light of evening, as in a room in which we rest, and for small reason think the world imagined is the ultimate good. This is, therefore, the intensest rendezvous. It is in that thought that we collect ourselves out of all the indifferences into one thing, within a single thing, a single shawl wrapped tightly round us, since we are poor, a warmth, a light, a power, the miraculous influence. Here now, we forget each other and ourselves. We feel the obscurity of an order, a whole, a knowledge, that which arranged the rendezvous. Within its vital boundary in the mind, we say God and the imagination are one. How high that highest candle lights the dark. Out of this same light, out of the central mind, we make a dwelling in the evening air, in which being there together is enough. Of course, that's Wallace Stevens, described as a man who knew almost no one on a first-name basis. This. I'll start with the poem that was going to be on the broadside, and then you can decide if you want the broadside sent to you. It's about an imaginary museum that I had in a dream. I was reading a book about Northwest art, and so the artifacts in it are real. The Bungalow Museum. There is a privacy of mind that can shine a slight opening in an other. In the clearing, the field was white, the sky produced 2 moons. We found the blue bungalow in a grove of sugar pine. Displayed inside, a walrus hide stretched into a boat, a seal intestine parka, mucklucks sewed from salmon skin. I'd read about these artifacts. They made me sadder than I was. I would finish alone. Pelt still on the creature, thought of as hide. Gray whale, slipping out her calf in a cloud of duff. I like reading at home because there's things that don't have to be explained, like, what is Soviet Island? Okay. On this very day a year ago, I was reading in a little college, and it was 30 degrees below zero. That wasn't the wind chill, that was what it really was, and it was Iowa. It was so cold, it was perfect for poetry. It was like utter concentration. You just had to focus in. And I was asking the students there if they had a Superfund site in their little town in rural Iowa. And they said, well, there's some bars downtown that are kind of fun, but they were not being ironic. R. Come closer. Fall into the longitude, the form and flow of God. An act, a rite, a ritual we'll never get used to. presence or portent, don't say we had precious little warning. That morning on the ripe island, someone placed an enormous pumpkin on a pile of broken pallets. It looked like a chrome aurora, a giant mandarin. Meanwhile, on the farm island, bees nudged everything. Down the dirt road through the bloated orchard we rode in helmets lined with foam. Russian women in kerchiefs laughed, picking mushrooms in the slash. A girl in a gray veil ducked into a van. Out of the corn maze swished two young couples in satins and velvets, brushing off their garments. Meanwhile, the teen goat rubbed his horns on anything alive. Where do we insert ourselves into this richness, this picture? At the produce stand, the pink farmer told a fat girl to smile, and she would not. He said she should be ashamed. The 4 apples in our hands were 15 cents less a pound, he said, if we picked them ourselves. We had not. He said we could ride out and pick some if we preferred the lesser price. A woman squirted honey on the back of her hand and licked. Come back next year with the baby, the farmer said, handing her a box. She bought comb and jars and honey sticks. Bees nudged everything. Dusk poured in, orous and insistent, as everyone closed in on the fire and the pumpkin. I was feeling the tension of the fall right after 9/11, and that's when that was all taking place. Feeling a big, big pumpkin on a fire. I know there are a lot of editors here, quite a few, yes, yes. And you see, as editors, you see submissions coming in that have, maybe a certain word comes up, and you see it a lot, right? A certain word comes up. Like, what's one that you've seen a lot? Slash? Okay. Susurrus? Sidereal. Sidereal. So they're great words, nothing wrong with them. But I was a poetry editor for a little while in the Bellingham Review. It was a lot of fun. And for a while there, in a month, we would get 20 poems with Persephone in the poems. What was it in the zeitgeist, national imagination about that Persephone was just, she was popular. We need a new popular someone. The other bank of the river. Because personal poetry is no longer the dominant mode unless, of course, you are an other or can tolerate the overkill of Persephone spitting out her seed. I'll be impersonal as dust, the Lord protector of less, as self-indulgent as an egg. Let's blame it on the brain. I was going to stay asleep until I could stand music. Smudge of a day through lace, nothing moves when we lose delight. I'd been studying inner forms. Luckily, while I was voodooed numb and the sun's yoke hardened over our home, I hadn't made many promises I couldn't keep. People die in bed, my mother always said, nozzling her Electrolux through the pink sack of our sleep. Forget the cruelty of April. February had fangs, incisors of mini Daphs and Daphne. When you pulled me out of bed to the pale new park on the other side of the river, a reclaimed wetland as subtle as a roll of paper towels. Who could trust the cicatrix of post-industrial land planted with too many little trees trussed with warning signs, flapping, do not, do not, do not. I felt slippery, a chaleza in a cup and held tightly to the double helix of us. Off the paved path made from ground-up sneakers, we spotted a boy dragging a heap of goose by its fanned-out wing, the neck flopping like a question mark. His free hand struck at a small woman pulling him, who was, in life, his mother. She had a face like a mink and was screaming about disease. The boy yelled to us, "This one's already dead," and held the goose like a bagpipe. What will suffice is pleasure, every golden egg. Pain fits less into ellipses. Again, I apologize for the 3-pound storm that is my brain and me. I'm going backwards in time. I want to go in, and then I want to go out, and then I want to go in again. But I'm starting with this book, which came out just a year before last, and then I'll go back one more, and then I'll go back to things that I didn't even really write myself, some other person. But this is the title poem. There's a lot of fascination, obsession with jellies, jellyfish, as they used to be called. And the title poem is Drift and Pulse. And these are the Aurelia labiata jellies, the very frilly, feminine, pink. If you've seen one, you know it. They look like peignoirs, or they're just, you know them. The wonders. Drift and Pulse. Her moon opens to your moon, a pumping shadow of heart, no heart, a haloform, an oblate eye, under-frilled in crinolines, a ball gown sway and slave in champagne stockings. Out of her element, she is an apostasy on paper, egg white smear in a library book, pulsing iambs, oral arms, flesh pot shadow of heart, no heart, see-through soul in plexiglass, no brain, no bones, no spine, no heart, forms form. The dreamer in this poem is someone I don't know. His name is Poppy. So this is how his dream is as he's experiencing it. Poppy's sleeping. Lemon light, hurt of worry, my eye is all iris. Look through the small viewer to penetrate the black shaft. Who's this? Who's that? Green goes to yellow over there. The eye wants to be investigated privately. I've lost my sense of humor, vitreous jelly. A small island floating under a dark mood. The eye takes shape and raises a bluish moon stuffed like an olive. Do you see its black center tilting toward the earth? The honeybees and their filament harnesses with 4 wings to organize? The notion runs to brushy green, a green of aches and quells. White foams a halo around the poke of red. Satiny planet, penning all shapes separately. No people, artifacts, or habitations on this orbit. We're silly with light. We need our space. The brain pulls us to troughs, caldera and chattermark. Jump the fence. Stick hoof and muzzle into a complicated plot. Blue thumbprint, green linen, black sash, red dot, licked in its own atmosphere. Hold my place. We all know the tragedy of Meriwether Lewis. And maybe some of you saw the exhibit at the History Museum a few years ago when it was the 200 year. Did anyone go and see it? It was for school groups mostly to see, and there were some of the notebooks. That was exciting. And at the end, I think they wanted to make it kind of a quiet mention that he had died. He had suicided. It was written down kind of near the floor, so it was kind of kept quiet. And some people say there really wasn't much to celebrate about the voyage of discovery, but anyway, he was a person of promise. He was going to write everything up of the voyage, and it never happened. Meriwether. We don't want our heroes to succeed at suicide. We're too busy murdering each other. Let's back up to the miserable expedition, when geography was a neuro-wish for mythic symmetry, a mirrored landmass with Mississippi hinge. Details suck in sentimentalists. He hauled pewter penis syringes. In Oregon, fecund and horrible, the gorgon of rain, he craved salt and made some with his men, boiling seawater to kill time and rain. We want him to go home, to stay in love with the possible, to stop by will alone his tumbling into the intolerable logic of a melancholic brain. We've been duped by the rewrite of the Roughneck Inn, robbers shooting him to death, grabbing money from his saddlebags, leaving the red notebooks filled with minutiae of lands and tribes, exostars and skies. When he suicided, no one who knew the man named like a brightening mood was surprised. He'd already tried. Witnesses at the inn say he raved and paced, told wild lies. He spread his bearskins on the floor. He could no longer sleep in a bed. Now he would simplify his mind. Dear reader, should anyone be forced to live? He shot his forehead with a pistol. Then he shot his chest. He cut in with his razor. I'm so strong, he said. It is so hard to die. Although the news was sad, no one was surprised. The place where this was happening, where he had spent his last days, was Grinder's Inn in Tennessee. Grinder's Inn. No one could do anything for him. That's part of the tragedy. It's not so much of what they did on the voyage or what they saw. It's more him as someone seriously mentally ill, and there was nothing he could do except he drank. That's all he had. Have you been to Ape Cave on the other side of the river? The volcanic lava tube? Yeah. Love that place. Core. We'll be entering into the cave in this poem. But as in Plato's cave, someone said, it's been done. There's no shadows in this cave. There's no ideal forms. It's not Plato's cave. Every time there's a cave, it doesn't have to be that. Right? This is Ape Cave. Ape Cave, Washington. Core. The cave was clean and had an end. By clanky lanterns we saw no artifacts, no crickets, no crystals, no drippings. A fireball had cored that hole. What light there is, you bring. A band of us walked in. Some glanced back to verify an opening. The lava tube we penetrated. The lava tube surrounded us. No one, murmured the membrane of the cave. Cushioned with ourselves, magma and mandible, We were pulled up slope inside the rupture. The man with a shunt, the woman in her wings, shivery kids pulling back into daylight. At the rockfall, everyone had to turn back, blinking off the pulsed volcanic chill. I would go back inside, if only to see the faces floating into form, laved and gentled, intuitive visages, as though we were the only ones with faces, contrite with forces. I've heard we're now in the epoch called the Anthropocene, and I was convinced we were still in the Holocene, but since I've been reading about it, now we're in Anthropocene because it means that we have actually affected the climate and changed the earth. So we've left the Holocene. My book is out of touch, but the title is still the Holocene. Opal float, cobalt ocean, tell them I am sent me. Show me everywhere but in. My limbic system is convinced that God's a mystic fit, built in like ions talking in our wrists. A brain knows what it needs. I pray I am myself, a non-religious prayer. And so we dream of bees and what is not ourselves. Do you read me? All in all, I'm yours. I looked up the other day, and Emily Dickinson has 19 poems with bees in them, which is no surprise, right? But I'm reading a giant book study of wasps and their habitats. And they're secret. Everyone has a bad wasp, yellow jacket story of something that went wrong. I've been asking people, and they do. They've got the stories. But think of it, they make their own paper, and they live inside the paper. So I'm trying to avoid the bees for a while. Equipoise is a book of a lot of the South, which, since I don't live there, I'm not from there, as you know. I'm from the way far north, where we get about 300 inches of snow a year, and there's nothing really there. Everything's closed. It's like, who are the people who stayed behind? The mine's closed. Everything closed. There's nothing. The bowling alley closed, and it didn't even have automatic pin setters. It had kids that would be hired, and they'd have to, I'm serious, they'd have to stand behind the pins and set them up when people bowled the balls down the lane. So, but most of the poems in this book are from the South, which to me seems to be the place in America, tell me if I'm wrong, that has the most stereotypes attached to it. Really, really a lot of them. And so I'm going to take you right now into a southern auction house, which was, I love ritual events like this, and this was really great. And I did get a box full of old ladies' Sunday hats, a round hat box, and it was just, some of you like old hats. Yeah, yeah. You do? Yeah, I don't even know if you can get those wonderful carrying boxes anymore. And
once in a while, if you go to estate sales, like my house, I have a few.
I would love to see your hats. Oh, wow. Well, yeah. We waited through hours of stuff in this auction until they come to the hats. Objects of desire. Soap, soap, soap. God's in the letter O. And in the rural South tonight, everyone smells like soap. This auction house is dirty, but we're washed clean, and we want more stuff from the hard altar of objects riding the luscious earth. The auctioneer, a famous southern psychotic, dips in the mysteries and blesses the souls of fezzes and figurines. His milk glass eye sees every living thing increase. Jar of marbles, $3 bill, $2 sir, $2 gone. I almost wanted that. The second hand started and the light does work with clock now, $5 gone. Thank you, ma'am. Sold. And the new owned object swelters with intention in the wet hands of redemption. This week in Bosnia, a girl was raped repeatedly, then traded by the enemy for a major appliance, the paper said. In auction talk, that's not specific enough. $60 on the refrigerator that was working when we took it out of the lady's house. That's better. Now we know where we sit in chance and in contrition. Round hat box full of Lady Sunday's hats now. Tempting. But where do we find faith in this amphibium of stuff and death? Until last year, I owned one plate. What's more, I've sinned in other ways. But tonight, as witness to this litany, my mind's a prayer in pure perfume. A prayer in pure perfume. We lived in one of those little southern coastal cities where there's a little ice cream colored houses like Charleston, Savannah. This was above Charleston. It was Wilmington. Do you know where that is? It's where the Cape Fear empties out into the ocean. And there was nowhere to walk in town. You could walk on the sidewalks through the town, but there was nowhere, like here, you can go and you're out hiking instantly, practically. But there was nowhere to walk. So we'd go to this old couple 100-year-old cemetery, because there was hardly anyone in there, and there you could walk a long way, 250 years of dead people in there. And there had been people buried in there. There was one young woman in particular. I won't go into all the interesting people buried in there, but this woman was coming over from England in the 1800s, and she died on ship in crossing. And they still wanted to bring her over, so one of the things they were bringing to the plantations was whiskey. So they put her in a big barrel of whiskey to preserve her. So she was buried, and she's, I guess, still in that barrel of whiskey in that cemetery. But I thought so much, it's my own stereotype, I thought people in the 18th, 19th century weren't sexy. They just, it was all so secret, and they didn't get all worked up about that. And I don't know. So it's kind of a meditation on one's own prejudices about people in the past. They're sexy as we are. I don't know where I got that, but until the day breathes and the shadows flee. Miniature stone mansions line a sighing town of death, where snowdrops bell like wedding gowns of girls given early to shaping dreams, sewed to ivory gilt's forgiving grief. Eulalia and Grace and Ada are gone. Their stones keep vows with men who died young. Reasonable self in death's big company, when husband's stone still keeps close custody. I go ahead to make a place for you. What matters here is perpetuity. What's buried in here in secret interests me. What vows were given them to keep? What vows were perfidy? Did he loathe her kneading bread, then spread his risen slices thick because he could? Did she keep one bed? When he found her heat and quelled the lace, what did they call the violet miracle that their antebellum bodies made? I'll try to ask this more elegantly. What will last the ocean of a life? The words, a lover, compassion's craft? Hold back the beaming white spirea. All overclothed glances evaporate, an unlaced evanescence. Until the day breathes and the shadows flee, everyone here in sighing town will sleep in the moon as the moon wears down, forgivable half-souls swallowed whole. My husband and I got married there in a church that had just been built in the early 1860s, and it was used as a stable for horses for the Union Army. It's pretty incredible. This is a Valentine poem. And I really like to go to places that are off-season, especially the beach, and, you know, when it's calm. Grace. The black fish undressed easily on their blue plates. Smug in love, they went ahead and ordered chocolate layer cake to celebrate the red. Outside the picture window, February blew and bounced the sun across a beach. St. Valentine. She thought about the things she'd like to buy. Below, 3 boys in black wetsuits were stretching in new skins. They looped and tossed each other closer to the surf. 2 coupled while the other watched. Then they recoupled and were watched. What is there to fear in men, all seed and sullen play, she thought. And then she saw a crowd of dolphins loop and toss, fins circling like saws through the sea of possible thought. Next, there was a moment, not much farther out into the ocean, when she saw the sea do something strange. Not much farther out, where water came to water, she saw the waves turn over and open an old Sisera in the sea. On the meniscus of the moment she was alive in, a black cut fissured into form. Is anyone here not innocent? She asked herself, and glasses tinked, cloth folded, and a fish left its skeleton on a blue plate. As the slip knot pulled again around the ache of paradise. I think it helped, thanks. I was trying not to. Thanks. Don't forget your driver's license. All right. I think there's a lot of poetry in this room right now. Does anyone not write poetry? Really? Okay. A few hands. Okay, that guy in the back. Don't give him cookies. Okay. Well, you know how we have to make exercises for ourselves to just, you know, on a sunny day, any day, doesn't want to happen. And I have, where I grew up, we have rather round O's, and my accent is, I think, toned down some when I talk to my family. But where I live, It sounds a little bit like this. I'm not making fun of my people, but it's like, you guys, we have to go now, eh? Okay. If you've been to where I'm from, so I thought, okay, I'm gonna make a poem and cram in as many of those O's as I can. So it's an exercise, but it was fun, and all poems are exercises, right? A study in O. There's 70 of them. Don't count. Although they felt the chromosomal undertow, they were prone to follow the old code, and so no one misspoke. No one allowed the holy smoke to shroud a throaty episode. No one moaned an orgy of self-reproach. The deadbolts on their homes had not corroded. No one misspoke. One cold morning on the corner of Oak and DeSoto, they said, hello. The old vertigo flowed and overflowed, even though they had hoped to postpone the whole explosion. No one misspoke. Come on, that was a serious poem. Okay. Do you believe that poems can be fiction? It's like Ovid and, Dante, all the myths and epics of the world. Yeah. I was working on a series of poems about women living in lighthouses, and women were, in fact, often lighthouse keepers. Really rough job, especially when people are shooting up your lighthouse like they did at Cape Mears. That lens in there, if you've seen those Fresnel lenses, it's beyond. Anyway, this was about a young woman, 19th century, and she gets involved with a sailor, and she's pregnant, and he promises her. It's the oldest story in the world, right? And she's abandoned, and her family doesn't want her around, so she goes and lives in the lighthouse and takes care of it too. You'll know when the bad guy comes in. He's a meat eater. Lilies showering down. On that island, I was learning what I loved. A little life for an animal with eggs. Clean as a peppermint, I gave off light. I was slow as soap, my simplicity astounding. Consider how infinite I was, walking every inch of that orchid-shaped island. No jangled thoughts, I knew only elegances. A storm's wash pinks the beach with jellyfish. In the salt marsh, visible in water, a seahorse, small as a baby's finger, wraps its tail around a reed to stay in place, or possibly for pleasure. From way out in the ocean he came like a rower, pulling himself in wood all the way to me. He loves salt, 300-year-old meat, the block, the fingertip. My lips were salt air sea. I thought, hummingbird, miraculous verb, one could be drawn to land on his salted palm. Am I at all mysterious to you, he asked. The blue notion fumed until it flickered open utterly. He gave and gave, then led me close to trumpets thread on devil's green. I went under, as the open sun fined up the old snake shack high at the rim of the sea. Below the fathers drape their mended nets to dry, the mothers hang bleached white by white and blue by blue. I eat provisions I've collected for confinement, jewel box of fish, a fist of soda bread, some licorice pipes, black and undeniable. I sleep alone on the circumference. These lighthouse walls are 5 feet thick, In hurricanes, a town could hide inside, but this storm abides with me. I'll leave the ocean for a moment. Go back to my first book. A celibate imagination. I'm thinking again of Stevens and how poetry is the supreme fiction. And I'm thinking about that poem I just read about the lighthouse keeper, a young woman, and how, I can't remember what newspaper it was, but they were talking about my work, which was really a lovely thing. But they said, when she was a lighthouse keeper, because from that poem, I was when she was a lighthouse keeper. Oh. Hi. I don't care about your actual uncle and his skull and sweet snuff, the rat-eyed rat on his root cellar, and real spots on his beeches, red spruces and papery birches. I too could love his ethnic ink. Where does your imagination make love with the world that's always, anyway, you? When you abandon the restoration of the real, wrap cords around the necks of power tools, where does your imagination reign? Over Uncle Anton's miter box? Oh, sad times washed in acid, you can't help but live inside your life. Even when you step outside in stockings oily with lanolin of the sheep who bore them. Even when you step outside in horror. I'll do just a few more little ones. I think we all write, before we write our things that we call poems, we write proto-poems, whatever they are. Well, I don't mean just like things you look at and you're embarrassed about later, but, write songs or keep little pictures or whatever you do. Where I grew up by Lake Superior, there were fabulous skipping stones, really flat. They looked like little tablets. So we'd scrape messages on them and skip them into the lake. So those are my, I feel like, poems. Salinity. I grew up on an inland ocean and licked unsalted stones, then skipped them over Superior, the only great lake I'd known. Deer came to lick the salt block in our field. Slender, intent, they made the pillar disappear. In secret, I licked the new block in our barn. The burn was formal, illustrative. I went swimming with a boy to touch him underwater. In the reeds, I licked the salt flame off his chest. Through no fault of our own, we are called to ocean, called to salt, and called alone. We're all ethnic. It's an overstatement, we are. But, and this is just one version of a family's history, and it always seems like I should be 100 years old to have this history, because it's such a late settlement of America. I mean, my father came over, it's the old story, the Finns built the sauna house first before they built the house, the real house, or the barn, because that was so central, and they lived in the sauna until they built the house. And I mean, it's that old story, and now here we are reading in Milwaukie. How that happens. Okay, So this is the second longest poem I ever tried. I just kept putting it in and out of form for 7 years. It drove me crazy, and I've got one like that I'm working on now too. But Diorama Notebook. I won't say anything else. The very eye ants into the museum case of history. Diorama, tableau vivant, climbs the peasant girl's triple skirts and rests on the pale skin line of her braided wedding crown, the white road of her head. The stasis of faked history splayed in smudgeable terms. North is pure delusion, snowblind and rapturous. Peasants, saints abuzz in the miasma, the presences and outcomes of lexicons know how long a dog can bark. Slashers and burners, escape artists, a family sick of the past with a name that translates. Burnt over fields sown with grain. He hasn't been seen in these parts for some time. I want to live in a commonwealth of heroes where history hasn't lost its nerve. Our matriarch never owned a pair of pants. She won't speak English or use spoon sugar. She won't turn lights on when the woods around her stitch up at night, and now she must finally buy the farm. Sell the farm. Yes. Whoa. I'm rewriting history as I read it. Whoever you are, you could buy this life-size diorama of immigrant life for less than the price of a nice foreign car. My father kept a clean-shaved face. The week before he was to sail back home to find a wife, he found my mother at a dance. The accordion pleats a schottisch. Lenin's portrait beams a New World saint behind the stage. My father smiles as though taken by a universal spell. My mother has saved herself for the wholly invisible. I see them as a couple on a cake, moving without moving for their own sake. Lard in 2-pound coffee cans makes a sauna stove burn hard. When the wooden door slams shut, blood boils in the thick of skin. Corpuscles scream in heat that might make you think of old-time words like God and sin. I have been a bride, a wave motion of crinoline, have seen the broken strand of pearls wash away in waves. What does the partner want? To make a new wife out of gold? I have watched men shave and taken them to bed. Lovers with seams, have you stayed stitched? Oh, the holy naked sex, we lather in the New World mess. Leave the homestead unlocked, unboarded, and tell the flannel town the credenza's full of bric-a-brac. Let them wake up spoons and pull the needle through the lace. Let them strop the double blade and shave the window frame. Let the town kids liquor up and hump the metal beds. Let hunters fire through the floor. When the table burns, let them burn the door. Douse the husk with gas and let it finger flames. Let the dead line up and laugh, still awkward in America. I can't leave you there. I can't. Okay. It's pretty awkward, you're right. Okay, I would love to finish with a poem that's a little fantasy. It's just a little dream. Instead of so much poetry is all about longing and desire. And I wanted to write a poem about having, not longing. Against desire, even. Fullness. What is there to want? All the work is done. Girl clock, cat clock, sun clock, tick and sync today. Love life, love life, love life, they say. The world again opens to wake us up in black and white and lift the day to robin's egg. We know our exact balance. We have everything. Trading perfume over garden walls, wisteria opens for bee season. Men become handsome to the wives of other men, and women breathe in their own beautiful beauty. The genius baby licks pollen from a gardenia her father holds out for the pretty neighbor. All give in to deliciousness. What is there to want? All the work is done. And then the visiting on sea blue porches all have something to show for the day. The mail carrier strolls back to talk about art for the new fire station. As dark washes water blue down the street, our comet swings by, loaded with the dream that hums the world alive. All the work is done. What is there to want? We know our exact balance. We have everything. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening and everything. And ask me anything.
What's your writing practice?
Oh, it's
In
so
the morning, in the evening?
Morning, always morning. Yeah, good day is get up, read poetry, and then for about an hour, and then go to my desk, write something out by hand. It really helps to get inside of the bubble of language again. That really helps. And then write until I'm silly with words. So I can go sometimes 6 hours. But I'm a useless person. My husband will attest to that after that. And then I do something, I try to, a useless companion, verbally useless. And then I try to do something physical, work in the yard or go work out or do something. And then the afternoon's good for nonfiction reading, and I read novels at night, so that I was kind of like feeding the whole thing. But that's a really good day.
What's a bad day?
The poem I'm working on for, yeah, when you try form after form and it's just, you have to put it away. You just, however long it takes. And I just think, if I just go in there and I try this, it's gonna yield, it's gonna open. And it's not, but that's really hard. Bad day is total distractions too, but that's life. That happens.
How'd you get interested in jellyfish?
Oh, they're just incredible. Yeah, I guess seeing them on the beach, both on the East Coast and here, and snorkeling a lot. I'm not really wanting to get too close to some of them, but yeah, they're just, it's about, as poets, we're looking for perfect forms, right? And it's about as perfect as it can get. It's almost like there's nothing. You take one out of, I saw this at an aquarium once. They took one out of water and put it on I know it's cruel, it's for like educational purposes. They took it out of the tank and they put it on this piece of paper. And they said, come back in an hour. And it really was just like egg white smear. It's form. But a box jelly wouldn't do that. It keeps its form even. I wouldn't do it, it's mean. But it would keep its form. It's like a big muscle. So, yeah.
With your teaching at some point here?
Yes. I loved almost all of it. Till the end.
How many years were you teaching
let's see, I think about 15.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it all except for the apparatus that goes with teaching, committee meetings, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, one of my students just had his poem read by Garrison Keillor on Friday. Yeah, he just had his first book come out, so pretty happy. Yeah, that's the really great part, to see students, what they're going to do. Yeah, I love that part. Carolyn, hi.
You really mined your ancestry for lots of good poetry, and they spent a lot of time in songs. I guess with,
It's not just them.
So what's this that I hear about a Finnish-American anthology that was recently published? Did you comment on that?
You are so funny. If you don't know Carolyn, you have to meet her tonight. It's a book that came out last month, and it's a professor it used to be called Suomi, which is the name for Finland, but they changed the name to Finlandia College, and it's in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan. And she's put together an anthology of 20 writers from about the past 70 years. So I'm happy to be in there, You'll see it. No, even though I'm happy to be in there, as one of the poets. You know how you find out things, part of why we write poetry, I think, is that we're recording presences of not only our family history, but so many things. But I just found out, my dad's this quiet guy, and I just found out that his father would go on the stage in the Finn Hall and recite poetry, and just found that out. So maybe there was poetry in our gene pool. I don't know. So, what else? I can ask you something. Sage?
What themes are occupying you now?
Oh, I don't want to talk the book out of existence, but it's about how cultures steal art artifacts, ritual artifacts, and the market in those, and how they're traded around the world. It's basically stealing history, but it's been done in every culture, everywhere. So, yeah. The poem that's giving me the most trouble is about this statue of Osiris. I won't talk about it any further. Go look at him again tomorrow. See about that.
Is that the same poem you were mentioning before?
The hard one, yeah. And maybe it'll just not even be in the next book, but that's what I'm looking at, is how things are stolen. There have been some really juicy stories in the news in the past year or so at the Getty Museum. Things being sold, bought without provenance. Provenance is the big thing, but you can make it up. You can say that Greek diadem from 300 BC has been in your family for forever, and you can have it written on parchment, so then the dealer will sell it. But the curator at the Getty, who's no longer the curator at the Getty, Marian True, she's put on the paper a lot, and she's just one example. It's all the major museums. And, wow, think of the Elgin marbles, It's an old story, but she bought this gorgeous diadem it was being marketed around Europe in a cardboard box, and she bought it in a Swiss bank vault. And that's kind of when things all went wrong. But it's been expatriated back home. It's back in Greece. Not in the Getty. I think it was Etruscan. So, and then it was in the Getty, that's where I saw it, was in the Getty Museum. It's absolutely intricate and beautiful. You can see pictures of it maybe on their site. So, one more question, or? Here comes Tom. Thank you very much.